Hi, well, welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Carr, and I'm coordinator for the Coastal Marine Ecosystem-Based Management Tools Network, the EBM Tools Network. I'm also editor of the Skimmer on Marine Ecosystems and Management, and both of those are services of Octo. With me today, I also have John Davis, who is president and CEO of Octo, and founder as well, and he also edits MPA News and is one of the moderators of the Marine Debris Info listserv. So we're very glad you can be with us today. Today we have Carla Elliff, Mariana de Andrade, Natalia Grilli, and Vitória Scrich from the Oceanographic Institute of the University of São Paulo in Brazil, who are going to be describing São Paulo's strategic plan for monitoring and assessment of marine litter. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that there's going to be a presentation from our four presenters, and then we'll have time for question and answers. You can send questions as well as comments in through both the Q&As area as well as the chat. With the chat, you have the option of sending questions to just the moderators, to all the moderators and panelists, as well as to the entire audience. We just ask that if you send anything to the entire audience, that it be related to the topic. And please be professional and respectful. And we welcome you to send in questions at any point. We'll save substantive questions till after the presentation, but you can send them in at any point. Okay, well, welcome Carla, Mariana, Natalia, and Vitória. I'll turn it over to you now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, John, for the opportunity. Can you hear me? Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Yes, okay. We thank you for the opportunity to talk about a little bit about our work. Today, we're going to present the project that resulted in the São Paulo Strategic Plan for Monitoring and Assessment of Marine Litter. This project was a partnership between the University of São Paulo, the São Paulo state government, the Brazilian Fund for Biodiversity, and the Norway Embassy in Brazil. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our presentation is divided in 4 topics. First, we're going to give you a context on marine litter public policies. Then we will speak about the steps for building the plan, a little bit about the participatory process, and finally about the implementation of the plan. So marine litter is a social and a political problem, and it is a multi-scale problem that comes from the global scale to the local scale. Next slide, please. So it's very important that we have some international agreements on the topic, because this will influence the other scales and dictate what the countries will do at the local scales. So, and their policies interact between each other. Next slide, please. Marine litter is a global problem because the sea doesn't know any borders, and which happens in one country after the the trash goes to the sea can affect negatively other country and other side of the planet. So we have, since the decade of 1970s, we have some conferences, treaties, and technical reports on the topic. And the one of the most important ones was the 5th Global Convention on Marine Litter that happens in Hawaii in 2011, that resulted in the Honolulu Strategy, a global framework for prevention, management, and mitigate of marine debris. But all these documents and policies, they work as guidelines and voluntary commitments that government and organizations do and have to implement on their own realities. So they're very broad, so they can be adapted everywhere. Next, please. At the regional scale, I would like to highlight two programs. The first one is UNEP Regional Seas. This was the first regional program created in 1974. And the Stockholm Convention for persistent organic pollutions created in the early 20s. And they first were more focused on marine pollution itself, but with the time they became more broad, so to include ecosystem approach and the integration between land and ocean activities, which is very crucial for understanding and mitigate marine litter problem. Regarding the Stockholm Convention, the environmental company for the state of São Paulo is the regional center of the Latin American and Caribbean countries. And this environmental company was part of our partnership for building the state plan. So it's very nice to see how those connections between the local and the regional scales work, and how can it be to gain scale and to implement in our own realities. Next slide, please. About Brazil, so for those one who don't know Brazil yet, is the biggest country in South America. It has more than 8,500 kilometers of coastal line, where lives about 50 million people, and has a lot of different activities on our coast, such as tourism, fishing, industrial activities that of course produce a lot of waste. And in our country have two main policies that deal with the subject, which is the National Policy for Solid Waste Management, launched in 2010, and the National Plan for Combating Marine Litter, launched in 2019. The Solid Waste Management Plan doesn't actually mention marine litter itself, but it aims to manage all solid waste that can end up in the ocean when it's not well treated. So it's a very important policy to account for. And the National Plan for Combating Marine Litter is one of the Brazilian government commitments made in the Ocean Conference in 2017 in New York. So again, how it's very important to understand how the links between the global conferences, then the national scales, and how this can be implemented in the local scale. So because of the voluntary commitment of Brazilian government, we now have a combating plan. It's a national scale, but this plan brings a national diagnosis and fosters that each state of Brazil build their own combat plan that can be that made sense on their own realities, because Brazil is such a big country and it has very, very different realities from the north to the south. Next, please. So São Paulo state is located in the southeast of the country, is the most populous state in Brazil. It has a coastline of about 900 kilometers, where live over 2 million people. And this 2 million can easily be doubled in summer season, where the shoreline, the coastline of São Paulo receives lots of tourists. And the first public policy in São Paulo state was also a solid waste management plan, launched in 2014. And this plan also didn't mention too much about marine litter, except a topic about abandoned, lost, or otherwise discarded fishing gear at sea, which of course is a huge problem, but is tiny if you compare to all marine litter that we have here on the coast. This state plan is revised every 4 years. So in 2018, it became the discussions to revise this plan. And at the time, the São Paulo state government understood that the new plan in 2018 should have much more about marine litter than the first version had. So we had a formal partnership between the São Paulo government and the University of São Paulo to form a marine litter working group based on technicians from the government and scientists from the Oceanographic Institute to build a whole new chapter about marine litter in the new version of the solid waste management plan. And this plan brought lots of interesting goals. And here I will highlight 3 of them. That one was to build and implement a state plan for monitoring and assessment of marine litter, which we will detail here. In the future, based on the monitoring and assessment plan, to build and implement a state plan for combating marine litter. And another very interesting goal is to integrate marine litter with other social environmental policies, such as water resources and climate change policies that should account for marine litter. So we want to detail a little bit more about the first goal, which is the state plan for monitoring and assessment of marine litter. That the project to create this plan wanted to create and integrate the structure and strategy to diagnose the issue of marine litter in São Paulo state. So what kind of litter we have, how much we have of marine litter. We understand that it was very important to combine knowledge and engagement and interaction of the key stakeholders in the state, and establish a participative channel with communication between science and management. I would like to call Vitória, so she will talk a little bit more the step-by-step to build the state plan. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vitória, and I will start sharing with you the steps taken to build this strategic plan for monitoring and assessing marine litter. So the first step we had was to gather and synthesize the most relevant materials about marine pollution worldwide, focusing on the UN and the Ocean Decade, in order to follow the international guidelines and to align the project with the global recommendations and directives. So the UN Environmental Programme was a huge support material for us because of its manuals on building action plans for marine litter. And we also focused on building knowledge towards the Sustainable Development Goal 14.1, which talks about having a significant stock decline in marine pollution by 2025. Another source material since the beginning was the joint group of experts on the scientific aspects of marine environment, or GESAMP, as we say it in Portuguese, at least. And the reports that they have made about the issue are really important to us, especially report number 99. Report 99 was our best friend in 2020 at home. They present, and this report especially presents an important background information on how to categorize the sources and the impacts of marine litter. And besides positioning the plan internationally, as a plan for São Paulo state, we also used the São Paulo State Plan for Solid Waste as another umbrella in which our strategic plan went under. As Natalia talked about previously, we used it a lot as a support material as well. And by doing that, we could also have strategic links with the existing public policies in the state, and we could also show these interconnections in the plan as well. But besides all the official knowledge base, we also consider that the empirical knowledge from all the stakeholders of the different sectors and that actually act in the context of the state of São Paulo was what we held as the main contribution for the plan content and also the plan format, even because the stakeholders own the plan and it's also their plan to be implemented. So this expertise and experience were really, really crucial in this stage, in this first steps of development. And for that reason, next, Mari, please. For that reason, it was really important to ask who are these relevant stakeholders to be joining the construction of this plan. And the next step we took to answer this question was performing some stakeholder analysis techniques that consisted in two main techniques. First, the first one was mapping stakeholders within a focus group of specialists on the issue. And the second one was the snowball methodology. Next, Mari, please. The focus group of specialists yielded a list of stakeholders, and the snowball methodology complemented this list, where all the stakeholders previously mapped were contacted in order to answer who else should be involved in the process. And we had almost 400, next, Mari, please. We had almost 400 stakeholders mapped at first from the 5 different sectors, the scientists from universities, the public sector, the private sector, the third sector, which were mainly the NGOs, and associations from the civil society. So after mapping, we started the formation of this multi-sectoral stakeholder network on marine litter for the state of São Paulo. And the next step we took was mapping what we already knew about marine litter in the state. Considering that the existing data of marine litter already collected in the state was not gathered and available in any platform, and we had no statewide network about marine litter, and the information and data about the problem was scattered all over the place. We wanted to reunite that the most that we could. So we performed a systematic review to investigate what had been published in scientific literature about marine litter regarding data or information of any location in the state of São Paulo. We went through the main search platforms and we found 2009 publications. And this review showed us many interesting stuff, which I cannot cover here. But this paper is being submitted and we hope to share that all with you soon. But among these results, we found that there are few, next, Mari, please. There are few seasoned researchers and few researchers with multiple publications. So publications are very punctual, and there is a lack of long-term studies. And there is also a lack of research connection between research groups, showing us that collaboration is needed and long-term studies are needed. And another thing revealed from the review, the systematic review, was, of course, the lack of standardized methodologies for litter collection, and therefore there is no standard data on that as well. So our goal in the strategic plan is to improve collaboration, to harmonize this data and collection methods, considering all stakeholders' expertise and experience in the field. The plan is based on this participatory process, on a collective learning process, and where we invited and engaged all stakeholders to build this plan collectively, as we already said. And from this point on, we knew that things would not be exactly as planned, but it would be exactly in the way that it fits on the context of the stage. And for us, this is why keeping it as a participatory process is really important, to really fit in the context of what is going on in this location. And of course, besides being a transparent and a representative process for all groups of people. And well, following that, we advanced together as a big group, as a really beautiful network, on the next steps, presential and virtual steps, which Carla will present to you next.
Okay, thank you, Vitória. So this is our whole context, and we had 18 months to get this done. So this is our basic timeline. Our project kicked off in August 2019. So this was after the State Secretary of the Environment and Infrastructure had signed this agreement with the Oceanographic Institute of the University of São Paulo. So there's already an agreement between the institutions to work together. And from there on until today, basically, we've been having lots of different moments of interaction with our stakeholders. Next slide, please. And I'd like to highlight 4 of these moments to you. So we had our first workshop. You can go to the next one, please. Thank you. We had our first workshop in December. And we had our plan launched now in January, so a few weeks ago. We expect to have our published plan also translated into English and Spanish, available on our website in the next few days. So please check that out as soon as it's out. And next slide, please. So we had around 400 stakeholders that we found were relevant for the process. How can we get these people together to talk about marine litter? We had to do a whole process of prioritizing which stakeholders we would be interacting initially with. So in this first interaction held in December, next slide, please, we gathered around 80 stakeholders at the Oceanographic Institute in the university. And these were people and institutions that were able to gather data and host data and collect data in different ways regarding marine litter specifically. So this was our first interaction, and we did lots of very interesting exercises with this very diverse group of people from all sectors. Next slide, please. We talked about policy concerns. So people who are familiar with the GISA report that Vitória mentioned, GISA highlights 7 policy concerns which are very relevant for marine litter. These are tourism, food security, human health, shipping and navigation, fisheries and aquaculture, animal welfare, and biodiversity. So this is important so that we can have a very broad view on the issue. Next, please. We also talked about the compartments that marine litter is found in São Paulo state specifically, or in other environments if the people were familiar with those. So we had litter interacting with the biota, litter in the surface and water column, on the seafloor, and along the shoreline. When we talk about shoreline, we mean basically every ecosystem from mangroves and sandy beaches and rocky shores. So this is a very broad concept, but it makes it easier for us to think of different compartments for us to monitor and assess. Next, please. We also had a very good, rich discussion about the impacts and the pathways these impacts occur. So litter deposited or floating has a very different impact from litter that is being ingested by the biota, or is that or what's causing entanglement. Dispersion of species that can be potentially invasive species. That's also a very important topic to be discussing. And also the leaching of chemical substances into the water through plastic, for example. Next, please. And we also discussed in this first workshop different sizes of marine litter. So we had people who had much more contact with macro-sized litter and others who worked more directly with micro-sized litter. So we decided to keep these 2 categories as our go-to categories in size-wise, although other subcategories are welcome, of course. A couple of months after our first workshop, so we already had this group of 80 people who had interacted in person with each other. We kept them up to date through emails and constant communication. 2 months afterwards, we decided to have our bilateral meetings. We call them bilateral because it's not about us teaching them something specifically, it's more about a two-way conversation. So next slide, please. We went along the coast of São Paulo and the state capital. So this was very different from the first workshop. Instead of us having people go to us at our university, we went to their place of work, so where the stakeholders were, and we held 5 different meetings in 4 different locations, all along those almost 900 kilometers of shoreline, which was an awesome experience. Next slide, please. We were very welcomed in these different environments. We went to conservation units, and we were able to talk to people who weren't able to go to the first workshop. So this was a very important interaction, and it was nice to see and be there with the stakeholders in their own reality, as it were. Next, please. During these bilateral meetings, the subject was different. We already had this moment of talking about marine litter and what the main problems were. Now we wanted to know what the expectations were in relation to the plan. So when we say we're building a monitoring and assessment plan for marine litter, what does that actually mean in terms of content? What must this plan have? Definitely. What would be nice to have, if possible, maybe in the best possible scenario, what could we dream of having, and what was out of scope? So as Natalia put it in our first context, we were within this political context that we had the state solid waste management plan being renewed. So lots of solid waste management issues were already being treated within that other state plan. So we didn't have to necessarily consider these at this moment. Also, combat actions for marine litter are not necessarily part of the scope of our monitoring and assessment plan for now. So this was important for us to establish limits and what really people were expecting about this document and how it could be used once published. Next, please. After the bilateral meetings, we also noticed it was important to hear more about what people were already having, what people were already doing currently. So we had our big systematic review on scientific data, but we wanted to know what was ongoing, what people were doing, and not necessarily publishing either as articles or gray literature either. So we had 60 answers from our group of stakeholders, most from the third sector and academia. Next, please. And it was interesting to see that most of the data that people said that they were collecting when they were doing monitoring and assessment programs for marine litter came from either beach cleanups or other shoreline cleanups in mangroves, for example, and also from academic research. So we had lots of term papers and theses and dissertations, which are usually a bit longer scale projects that we had people monitoring and assessing litter in different compartments that we had discussed. Most of these were in the northern coast of São Paulo and in the central coast. So we see a big gap still regarding the southern coast. And we had some responses about the inland areas as well. And then COVID hit and we had to adapt our second workshop. So this was originally planned to happen in April. So as I said, our bilateral meetings happened in February and we started planning our next get together at the university with our stakeholders, maybe a larger group if possible. And this was interrupted. And this was a very important moment in the project because we had to see how we were able to guarantee the quality of this participatory process, which was so important to us to continue having the input of our stakeholders. This was not supposed to be a top-down plan. It was supposed to be really a bottom-up construction, and we could not miss the chance of having a second workshop. Next slide, please. So we had instead an online workshop, which changed completely the way that we originally planned to have things happen, but we were still able to gather around about 100 people. Despite the Zoom fatigue and excessive amount of work people were enduring. This was back in August, and we were able to get everyone together to discuss some of the advances we had in the content of the plan. Next, please. The main advancement we had in the content since our first workshop and the bilateral meetings was that we were able to develop different indicators that the plan would be suggesting for people to monitor and assess marine litter. So we divide these indicators into generation of litter, exposure to marine litter, and effects of marine litter. And this was important so that we could be thoughtful of different sectors that may be more prone to be participating in one or other of these categories. So these lists of indicators are available already in the plan that's been launched. And they were designed also based on all these documents that we had and a lot of the input that we had from our stakeholders. Next, please. And once we had the second workshop, we had all this validation coming from the stakeholders, giving their input about what kind of indicators they could use, they would use, and what they actually are using now. We finished the first draft of the plan and we went to a public comment period, which is when a public policy is made available for the whole of society for comments, basically. So people were able to see the whole document and check out if they thought that something was not right, if they wanted more information about something or other. And we had 117 contributions. And this was, we consider this a very successful public comment experience. So we had people really diving into this material and giving their best at making this plan what it is today, a very participatory and representative plan for the state of São Paulo to monitor and assess marine litter. It was very important for us to have all these moments of interaction, and this really made a difference in what the plan is today. So talking about the project's legacy now, I'll pass the word on to Mariana.
Hello, everyone. Are you listening? Do you listen?
We hear you fine.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Mariana, and I'm going to talk about the legacy of the project. What happens from now on? Did we solve the marine litter problem? I would like to say yes, of course, but not yet. Building this project was a process with a lot of learning and adaptation. We grew as a team, as a network, as a database, and as a legacy for the future, not only for the state of São Paulo, but also for the ocean. And the result of this effort is the strategic plan. And this threshold between project and plan is a bit complex even for us, but the plan is kind of the output of the whole project. And this plan is a new format of environmental public policy in the state of São Paulo, which aims to integrate with other important coastal, urban, and social environmental management instruments here from the state. And the integration of these policies is one of the cornerstones of the project, a determinant factor for the success and the longevity of the plan as itself. But let's talk about the future. With the launch of this plan, we close an important cycle and open a new door. But we now enter the implementation phase of everything we designed. We need to know in practice, in real life, if the indicators make sense, how to manage the data, how to keep the network of people engaged, and how to promote actions that complement the journey of monitoring and assessing marine litter in the state of São Paulo. And the governance of this plan requires a system based on ethics, transparency, equity, diversity, accountability, legitimacy, and institutionalization. These are topics that should be further developed by the whole team that will be implementing the plan. But how to get along? How will stakeholders get involved in this new phase? Now the project and the plan become a program. And in this program, we intend to understand which commitments can we make as a network? How do we contribute to the feeding of the data platform? How do we design methods for data collection that are more consistent with the work already ongoing? And how can we build connectivity with other states of Brazil and even countries in Latin America? And also, can we use the strategic plan to outline a plan to combat marine litter? Yes, so many questions, but that's our future as a project and as a plan. It is essential that the combat plan also be based on the articulation among public institutions at all levels, public agencies, business sectors, non-governmental organizations, and universities and research institutes. And this joint action based on multiple sector cooperation may allow the sharing of work, decision-making, policy proposals, and the encouragement of applying good practices among all stakeholders represented. And we believe that these stakeholders will meet at the Marine Litter Working Group that Natalia mentioned before, within the structure of the government of the city of São Paulo. And it will become like a forum that will host and coordinate discussions and decisions regarding the plan, and manage its legacy, which is a website very important for institutional memory and information management and the database of the project and of the plan, of the implementation phase. The stakeholders network of over people and, an institution that are already mobilized, and also the communication products that we built upon during this whole process, translating the scientific knowledge to the general public about marine litter, about the project, about the process itself. So to tackle marine litter and moving towards a future idealized by the Sustainable Development Goals, not only the 14, but all the 17 goals, and the UN Decade of Ocean Science for the Sustainable Development, it's crucial that the responsibilities and opportunities of assessing, monitoring, and combating marine litter are shared and participatory developed. Implementing the plan will still be a complex process, we know, but we believe that our passion and our collaborative work can lead us to a cleaner ocean and a future of science, policy, and society working together. We hope for this cleaner ocean, and we would like to take this opportunity to make the project and the plan wider than the São Paulo state, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you. Obrigada.
Okay, thank you all. This was a great presentation. We already have a lot of good questions, but again, for everyone who is participating today, we welcome you to add additional questions either in the Q&A or through the chat. So to get started, let's see. One of our first questions to come in was, do you have data or publications about the current state of marine ecosystems of Brazil affected by fishing gear? I am especially interested in studies of impacts over marginal reefs.
Yeah, I can take that. We did have one of our classifications for the publications, our systematic review was regarding entanglement and ghost fishing specifically. And we found that only 6% of the publications, scientific publications, which involved grey literature as well as peer-reviewed articles, regarded this aspect. And they're mostly from the Fisheries Institute of São Paulo. This is a systematic review only for the state of São Paulo, but regarding the whole of the coast of Brazil, the World Animal Protection Organization, they have a really good report on ghost fishing, and they report on some findings in Brazil. And they have very scary numbers, I'd say, about the occurrence of fishing gear in different ecosystems. I can't say for sure about marginal reefs. I do know that it's probably a sub-studied environment regarding the impacts of marine litter on reefs and corals.
Okay, thank you. And then for the next question, did you only use published data from researchers, or did you incorporate data from local removal efforts? For assessment, did you use modeling or map debris that was already present in the environment? Okay, then there's actually 3 questions. Let's just do the first one. Let's separate them. Did you use only published data from researchers, or did you incorporate data from local removal efforts?
I think this question is about 3 different steps that we made to the plan. The first thing is the literature review. So yes, was only published papers for us to know what we know about in our network of stakeholders. We made a Google form for them to tell us about what kind of data they have. So this will be what they collect in their daily activity. And a third stage will be the implementation of the indicators that we thought we published in this paper, in this plan. Sorry, that will be the day by day marine leader that we will find, that the actors will find on their work, and that should be inserted in the future platform. I don't know if I'm clear enough, but I understood from this question that the data that we are putting at the plan comes from different sources. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you. Okay, for the next one, for assessment, did you use modeling or map debris that was already present in the environment?
Yeah, this would be, as Natalia was mentioning, something that if this was a published paper, for example, or a conference abstract or something that people had as a publication, it would have we would have got that in our systematic review. So yes, but also no if it's not a published project yet. So as she mentioned, we have lots of indicators that we have suggested in the plan. So if there are modeling programs going on involving marine litter, they can certainly feed us with data in the near future with the indicators. So for the moment, we have things that have been published, and we have our questionnaire with the indications of things that are ongoing, but we still don't have these data organized in a platform. This is something that we'll be dealing with in the implementation phase, which happens from February now onwards, so that we can have this part of the objectives of the State Solid Waste Management Plan.
Okay, thank you. And finally, from this set of questions, did you include freshwaters and tributaries in your assessment?
No, this was actually something that ended up being a sort of a limitation, because the environmental compartments that we're considering come from the Gesamtbericht report, which, as I mentioned, include the biota, seafloor, water column, and shoreline. So shoreline is a kind of difficult environment for us to pinpoint exactly, because when does an estuary start being a river and stop being, you know, an ocean kind of thing? So there's a gap there that we still need to address, thinking of the source to sea approach regarding marine litter. So we hope that our generation of waste indicators will help us to better understand this this connection with freshwater and tributaries into the ocean. So this is something we still have to work more to gain a very robust kind of approach.
Okay, thank you. We have a number of questions about who was in the stakeholder group. There's a question, did you invite the waste generators and the packaging engineers? And there was also a question, are fishers included in the stakeholders group?
Yep, we included the waste generators and the packaging sector. The first question. So we considered all the steps regarding solid waste production, since the design of the material, the production of the material, and the private sector was the sector with the least number of stakeholders mapped. But we were really happy to have some key stakeholders involved in the process regarding the industry. Not specifically the industry itself, the private institution, but we had big private, big associations of industries, associations of private institutions that are pretty much the biggest the biggest institutions in the state. So we invited them, and they were also present. And the fishers, we also included the fishers in the stakeholders group. They were also mapped, but we didn't have attendance from this group, and we knew that this was a limitation for us, and something that we tried along the process to make them able to come. Not only the fishers, but other groups that are more distant from the academia and this public sector. But yeah, they were involved, and they are still in the network. I think there's another question regarding the stakeholders.
That's right. Yeah, I was going to add that one in too. There was a question, were informal waste collectors and pickers or their representative associations incorporated into the strategy development process?
Yeah, they were also included, waste collectors, also as an association. And we also had attendance from this group, which was really nice to have their contribution intensively, I would say.
Okay, thank you. There was a question, let's see. Are there deposit bottles in your country? I'm sorry, I think I asked the question when I was muting myself. Question, are there deposit bottles in Brazil?
I'm a bit unsure about what deposit bottles actually mean. Would that be something to like a waste collector specifically for bottles?
Well, generally you bring there's a deposit that you pay on the bottles, and I'm assuming this is what they mean. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is something that's still not common here in Brazil. A lot of the solid waste management initiatives, this whole plan, the state plan, was very much focused on reverse logistics and circular economy. So this is something that's growing in Brazil, but it's still not common. So you'll definitely not notice that every supermarket has this kind of program going on, but it's something that we hope does gain strength in the next few years.
Okay, thank you. Question, thank you for sharing these plans. Can you share some examples of metrics you are using to monitor successful execution?
Well, we haven't started the implementation exactly of the plan. Mariana, she'll be sharing the indicators that we are using so that people can have a look at what we're expecting to receive. But in relation to the metrics of success of building this plan, what we did notice was a very high engagement of our stakeholder network and a continuous engagement throughout the 18 months that we had the project going on. So this was very important for us, and this was a measure of success, let's say, in the building of the project. And I can't really see Mariana's screen so well right now. She'll be showing the PDF with the indicators to show what we're suggesting with the plan that people monitor and assess in the state of São Paulo.
Okay. Should we move on? Wait for that. All right. Well, we'll go. Yeah, we'll go ahead.
A short question while we'll get that done.
Okay. I am not sure this is a short question, but were there discrepancies between global regional goals and local governance? If so, how did you approach writing recommendations in the strategic plan?
There were definitely discrepancies, and as Natalia put it in the beginning, it's very important to do this kind of translation from the global perspective into the regional and local governance of what can be achieved. So we were very interested in this whole process of presenting indicators for these stakeholders, asking them, for example, if this, I don't know, SDG 14's target indicator, does this make sense for you here in São Paulo with the work that you currently do? Yes or no, partially, and things like that, so that we were able to create a kind of tailored version of our indicators to the local reality. So I think that when you're talking about global kind of indicators and monitoring it, it's much harder to actually think about the day-to-day activities of, for example, a waste picker association or a researcher with limited funds or something like that for their monitoring programs. So the whole idea, one of the big lessons learned, I'd say, with the plan is to really tailor the indicators based on what is the recommendation for a global regional goal, but have that toned down into a local scale so that it's feasible.
Okay, thank you. And did you want to discuss the table that's up, or should we move on with more questions?
Yeah, if Mariana wants to just quickly show kind of what the table looks like and how to read it with not all of its little colorful cells.
Can you see the table?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice. This is the table of exposure indicators. And here are some examples, and they are like physical compartments. Here is the information we want to monitor, and if it's have reference to micro or macro size of marine litter. Here are the suggested indicators regarding all this information and which compartment, which collaborative sector could help to give us this information, and which policy concerns are related also with these indicators. So this is the exposure indicators. These are the effects indicators of marine litter.
And this table helps to answer the previous question as well, because for building this table, we based on global recommendations and other plans of monitoring and assessment, and also what was have been doing by our network of stakeholders, and try to insert what is feasible, and that we share with the whole stakeholders network to then validate what was here, to see if no this is too it can be like feasible for Indonesia, but here it makes no sense. So we try to make this balance. So, and in some cases the indicator is just very general, like weight of waste, but this is for now what we can do for some cases. So that's what we're going to do. So we try to make that balance between what can we compare to other plans globally, and what we can do only here. So this is what we try to build.
Okay, thank you. We have time for a couple more questions. Here's one. What kind of capacity development efforts are you anticipating in implementing this ambitious and very interesting plan?
That's a very interesting question. I would say that we are anticipating having some capacity development courses, maybe, that can be part of our preparation for this next phase. For example, advocacy, communication skills of all kinds, to add on the previous experience that we had. And maybe the main thing is to have a multidisciplinary team. We will have more people in this team to implement this plan. So we are looking forward to have people from the social sciences, from communication, from international and public relations. So this would be our big key for the success we hope to have.
Okay, thank you. Question. Does the plan include methods recommendations for standardized monitoring? Is the expectation that the disparate methods that are not harmonized now will move towards a more standard method going forward?
Yes, absolutely. We're looking into talking to our stakeholders to understand what kind of monitoring initiatives they have. We've kept our indicators still very broad. So for example, talking about the presence of macro litter on a beach. We're not defining if that has to be items per meter, items per square meter, items per volume of sand, or anything like that. We're still leaving it open to different methods of collecting this information, because we understand that this is something that is ongoing. People have different methods to do this, and we don't want to exclude people from the process. We want people to get on board with us, and we want to learn about their routines. So one important part of the implementation stage will be definitely to understand what are the methodologies that people are currently using, and how these can be adapted, and what are the key aspects of these methodologies. So if I use an indicator that is items per meter, and Vitória uses one that's items per square meter, they're not exactly compatible, but they do give us an answer about maybe how much litter there is there, if it's a lot, if it's not so much in comparison to the next city, to the next beach. So maybe if we're talking more about the information that these indicators provide, it's a better start than having to deal with the whole huge challenge that it is to harmonize all these methodologies that are possible. So we want people on board, and if that means a more diverse range of methodologies, that's okay for us, at least for now, and then we'll work our way to a harmonized version which is feasible for at least most of our stakeholders.
Okay, thank you. If there was a question about the slide that's showing right now, if that report is available to the public, would one of you be able to paste a link to it into the chat so that everyone can access it? Someone was interested in looking at it further.
Yeah, sure. This one is actually a sneak peek into our translated version. So we still don't have the English and Spanish version online yet. We're dealing with like library issues and having it registered properly, but this will be sorted out in the next few days. We do have the version in Portuguese already available on our website. We'll have this pasted in the chat here and in the YouTube channel as well. And we hope to have this soon available for all, also in English and Spanish.
Okay. And if anyone were interested in getting it a little earlier, would they be able to contact you possibly for a draft?
Yeah, we could. Okay. We have our email address also on the website, and you can write to us, and we'll see what we can do.
Okay, great. And there's an email. Oh, I think some folks are pasting emails right now. Okay. One last question, and then we'll have to go. I live and work in Texas, but I am from El Salvador. I know it's very difficult to get local fishermen to buy in. How are you getting small-time local fishing communities to get on board when poverty is such a barrier?
This is definitely an issue that relates very well to our local reality here in the state of São Paulo in Brazil. During the construction phase of the project, we were really looking into stakeholders that were producing data and that could be involved. So we were also looking for associations, and we had very good partners, for example, with the marine protected areas, state parks and things like that. So we do have one of our partners in a state park does have a group of local fishermen who report to them when they have marine litter collected and how much that is. So it's not like we have to be there for every single stakeholder. We have our partners being multipliers of the indicators and of the objectives of the plan. So this was very great. So it's impossible for us to be everywhere and to reach everyone, especially communities that are less connected, that have a harder time, for example, being on an online webinar. That would be impossible in some situations. So, and we don't want to exclude people from that. So we really count on the power of our stakeholder network to help us get the message across to other places.
Okay.
Just adding on that, sorry, I think it was a really important thing in our construction phase that we had this financial subsidy from the Norwegian embassy. So we could also give financial support for stakeholders to be present in the presential phases, of course, before the pandemic. And this was also something that helped us to break this barrier of, as Carla mentioned, is a big reality in Brazil of poverty, for example, and this distant, this big land that we have, and then sometimes stakeholders were far away from where we were situated in São Paulo.
Okay. All right. Thank you all, Carla, Mariana, Natalia, and Vitória. We so appreciate you presenting today. And for everyone who's attending, we really appreciate you coming to learn more about this important work. And we very much hope we can have you on in the future to learn more about how the plan has progressed over the years. Okay, thank you everyone for both presenting and attending, and best wishes for your work.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you all for watching and participating.
Thank you, everyone. This was great.
Yeah, and lots of thanks coming from people who are attended, and you'll be able to see everyone's comments after. We'll be able to share them with you. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.